Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a relatively grayish July, 11th, 12th, 13? I don't even know. It's a Friday. But I don't know what the number is. I have a vague idea. I think today's walk and talk is going to be significant. Unlike many of them, I've done some prep for this one. And I'm going to be talking primarily, but not only, about the UFO, UAP phenomena. And I'm going to be continuing with the thread of getting it wrong. And the catastrophically surprising degree to which experts, witnesses, experiencers, analysts, scientists, quote, the government, unquote, which there really isn't any such thing, are starting from the wrong position. And they seem to insist on inhabiting positions that, while not entirely senseless, are explicitly misfounded. And the ways that they're misfounded naturally strongly resemble the ways in which all of human conceptual knowledge starts off on the wrong pivot, and then, having started thus, has to just keep playing the same crappy cards every time a move is made. So, I've been listening quite a bit lately to Ross Coulthart. Kudos to Ross for his brilliant work. But at the same time, some slaps on the wrist to Ross for getting so much wrong and for continuing a ledger of perspectival errors that will continually occlude what's going on rather than reveal it. And this is primarily the result of serving the fictions on which most of human knowledge is based. And also the difference between the knowledge that is accessible to human beings. We do have the capacity for articulate, sophisticated, nuanced, intimate awareness and understanding, except when the goal is pigeonholing identity. Now, this should be blatantly obvious by this late point in our cognitive evolution, but it is not. It is anything but. And pigeonholing identity, usually for the purposes of utilization, power exchange, commerce, war, psyops, intentional and non, right? Because you can conduct broad-scale psyops just trying to sell a product, right? Advertising is a psyop. Government, corporations, the military prison industrial complex, these are all sophisticated psyops, and they have been. They were born that way. It's not like they suddenly became malignant at some point in time. It's always been thus. If always means, 1,000, 2,000 years, something like this. So most of the nonsensical aspects of human knowledge depend on pigeonholing identity, determining what something is. And blatantly, this is not knowledge. This is fake. Knowledge is the result of deep relational and insightful questing. Science has some branches still remaining on that largely dead tree. And there are individual humans and groups of humans that are after something that resembles authentic knowledge. Good examples would be Randall Carlson, Rupert Sheldrake. This is not supposing that these people's theories are correct, rather that their positioning and perspectival intelligence is better than, what you can buy retail, so to speak. Gosh, who else was I thinking of? Leslie Keane. Sarah Jane's The Dream Incubator has authentic knowledge. Norman D. Ellis, the Egyptian Hierophant. These are people who are seeking intimacy and are skillful at it, and they don't care what the fictional nonsense on offer is. In the UFO realm, I'm trying to think of anyone who could stand up in this way. There are a few people. Jeffrey Mishlove, Jeffrey Kripal, Gary Nolan, Diane Pasulka in her way. These are people who are after actual insight and don't really care about the fictions. Except perhaps to, punch holes in them, let some light into our actual thought. So, the first problem is simply, it's based on a fundamental error, which is that one can abstractly know what something or who someone is. This is formally impossible. Formally. Logic tells us this cannot be so, right? The base roots of rationality should eject this for anything but relatively trivial or utilitarian purposes and limit the scope of this kind of knowledge dramatically. And this is the kind of knowledge that has become commonplace in our time. It's not knowledge, it's death. It's the death of insight, the death of relationship. Any relationship that you try to operationalize dies inside that context. The idea that science proceeds by killing and dissecting living beings to determine how the little machines work is not just insane and lethal, it's abjectly misfounded. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, right? It works for the purposes it serves. But those purposes rarely involve insight. Mostly they involve the capacity to commercialize or operationalize some finding in the mechanical layer. Now, medicine is the primary problem here because we have tens of thousands of years of human pharmakeia, the use of poisons, venoms, dusts, dyes, and so forth. Ritual, which is absolutely important and primarily missing, although it is sort of represented when you go to the hospital. Ceremony, purging, fasting, preparation, spiritual transformation, and so forth, all of which have been fundamental features of medicine from time immemorial. Yeah. Medicine never started out as a mechanical thing. And in our time, this is a terrifying tragedy. But it is, what it is. I'm not here to talk about medicine today. Although I am here to comprise some for your mind. So, the first bookmark that I have is that we've heard both recently and historically, famously, I think Ronald Reagan made some noises to this effect historically, how tragic it is that we haven't discovered an enemy in the sky which could unify humanity in an urgent and necessary reply to an extraterrestrial threat. Now, hopefully, just when I say these words, some of you can already see where I'm going. I'm going to just pause for a minute and give you a moment to think about what's wrong with this idea and what would be a far better perspective or position. Yeah. A far more natural, intelligent, insightful, and actually useful one. So this idea that what would unify the human peoples of Earth would be an extraterrestrial threat is absurd on so many levels. And there are factions in the military prison industrial complex that would be super happy for this outcome, right? As if they're not already eating up most of the wealth and the remaining ecologies on Earth in the pursuit of asymmetric military advantage, right? This would mean infinite funding, right? We would just build weapons now. And the Earth would be converted to an entire battlefield, which could happen instantaneously without aliens. Also, if the humans were going to unify against a threat, they should unify against the threat of their governments, corporations, advertisers, the military itself. There's no more significant threat than the idiocy of moderns that could possibly be imagined. The explosion of the sun, or, an incoming stony or icy body from space-time. Those are, or, a sudden methane release, which would wipe out, if not all, most complex life on this planet. The humans didn't unify around any of these threats. Why do you think they'd unify around a threat from the sky? And secondarily, but not insignificantly, there'd be no way to combat a threat from the sky. The humans are ingenious, but they're as stupid as they are ingenious. So, yeah, this is a ridiculous and psyop-y idea. But what might unify the humans is the opportunity to understand our origin, our nature, our relatedness with nature, time, space, other intelligences, and the chance to achieve a meaningful rung on the ladder of our developmental potential. Why isn't this mentioned? Nobody has this idea? Okay. So, I long ago learned to think from unity into distinction rather than from the separate privileged throne of my, unimaginably advanced humanity. Supreme over all other life forms and time-space itself. That's a position I do not favor and never have. So if one thinks from unity rather than from separate privileged distinction, which is the fundamental basis of fiction in human knowledge, and particularly you can see problems about this all over modernity. Who are you supposed to be? How should I think of you? What should I call you? All of these things have to do with a subterranean concern about being pigeonholed, right? And again, this branch of human knowledge, while useful in a modest scope of everyday or mundane or technological or commercial or military activity, is absolutely lethal outside it. We naturally and reasonably indict cohorts of humans historically and presently that commit genocide. Of course, the humans in general are omnicidal. They'll kill anything, everything, if they can. But what's been going on in terms of knowledge represents a very similar situation to what happened in Auschwitz. And some people may recoil and think, no, this is not the same thing. I'm not saying it's the same thing. I'm saying the resemblance is strong enough that we should pay attention. Because what we are given, what we are scripted to think and surmise, the methods of analysis that we've been provided with, that we've been infected with by our cultures, are seething death traps of lies, just straight up lying. And they're the result of the specific kind of knowledge escaping its proper applicable scope and dominating the entire human cognition, as if it were a demon. There's no greater threat to humanity that humanity can affect than that. That's the source of every problem that we face. So, my first offering is that might we not unify to have a chance together to discover what we are? In many cases, we've heard stories from contactees and experiencers where the entities that were involved suggested that they had terrible compassion and pity for us for a very strange reason. A 6-word phrase. You don't know what you are. We've got the wrong category for ourselves. If you start with an error that significant and stupidifying, and you become more deeply trapped in it with every move you make, there's no chance of you getting anything right? You have to go at the roots of axioms and suppositions and obliterate the ones, at least occlude the ones that blind you. Yeah. If you want a chance to get anywhere. So one of the things on offer here is the possibility of knowledge that isn't just poison, that isn't just deadly, stupid, trapping nonsense. And for billions of human lifetimes, right, the tragedies of genocide, absolutely real and completely irreprehensible. But the tragedies of cognitive and relational genocide that can be promulgated and propagated in human populations over a span of billions of human lifetimes. This is a tragedy we need to pay very close and effective interventionist attention to. And this is the promise of contact with non-human intelligences. Now, this word itself is misleading because, as I've said many times before, we are like fish that are swimming in non-human intelligences that compose and comprise the possibility of our existence moment to moment, but yet thinking ourselves separate, superior, intelligent, and so forth, we sacrifice the very pivots that we're announcing our supremacy about. You know, I could make really terrifying analogies, but I'll resist the urge. I'll simply say that this is like what happens in slaughterhouses to the animals that we farm for food, except it happens in human minds, billions of them. This isn't 1900, right? There are 8 billion humans. The damage is real. The agony is real. The fact that the humans get to continue living in their bodies is not trivial, but it deflects and is deceptive because if human interiority and the potentials of our human incarnation are prohibited from fulfillment by ways of thinking that make you dumber every time you touch them, that is a kind of genocide, right? It just isn't directed at any specific group, although branches of this tree certainly are directed at specific groups. So this is problem 1. Certainly we could unify around a future worth becoming together. And the idea that the only thing that could unify us is a threat from outer space is as ridiculous as it is deadly. You better hope that doesn't happen. Because the only way that's going to happen is if it's a fiction promulgated by bad actors to sustain their power and wealth and privilege and so forth. So another thing I want to talk about is this idea of the hitchhiker effect. Of humans that have, and there's some truth to the idea, but the conceptual basis is, again, completely misfounded because it rests on the concept that humans are separate, right? There's no real connection between them other than the relationships that they intentionally engage in or avoid. This is complete bullshit. The species is a unity at its basis. It's a unity with nature at its basis. It's a unity with time. Space is producing the species moment to moment as an expression of itself, just as if the universe formed a cone, and at the tip of that cone you have over here an octopus, over there the Amazon, over here Joe, over there Joe's daughter Sarah, all these things. Yeah? So there isn't something you can be that isn't the universe. The humans are one thing first, and one with nature first. And it's mostly just our thinking that deprives us of the direct and profoundly staggering experiences that are naturally accessible to us as members of a family we don't believe in, except in a kind of fairy tale or science fiction-y way. Yeah. So this hitchhiker effect thing, first of all, if you watch nature, everything is hitchhiking on each other. Everything. There's no such thing as not hitchhiking. There are 0 non-hitchhikers in nature. None. Right? The anciently conserved ecologies, all of the participants in those ecologies hitchhike on each other's behavior, timing, what they produce, what they consume. Everything is like this in nature. So, the staggering, fascinating result of the hitchhiker effect, there's nothing less ordinary than that. I should give some kind of an actual example. So, if you watch flocks of birds or hives of bees, right, they synchronize. And they don't just synchronize with themselves. There's no self-synchronization thing. Synchrony comes relationally from the environment. This day of the sun's character, this day of the moon's character, this day of the local environmental situation. This day, this minute of the flowers, right? Knowing at which parts of the day the flowers produce nectar, which the bees hitchhike on, and then other creatures hitchhike on the bees' activity in all kinds of ways by eating what the flowers produce, or by directly going to the hive, invading it, and getting honey. Yeah? So hitchhiking is the basis of reality. And to know a human being or a living place is to enter its sphere of transmission, of qualities, properties, perspectives, awareness, intelligence, history, future, all these things. So nothing could be less surprising than the fact that people who have experiences, which by the way is all people, but particularly people who have experiences of non-ordinary phenomena, become in a way sort of radio stations, if you will, transmitters, right? And much more to the people that they're intimate with, because intimacy is fundamentally important in all of nature. So, yeah, the hitchhiker effect, the great mystery of the phenomena. No, the absolutely obvious, natural spread of character, properties, abilities, senses, awareness, and intelligence, just like what happens in every branch of human endeavor, right? If you get involved with Amazon, there's a hitchhiker effect. And what it is that Amazon shares your purchase history with advertisers and other people, particularly if somebody wants to profile you for whatever purpose they might have in doing so. This information is priceless. It shows what you were interested in to the degree that you actually made a purchase. And so all of that information, right? You have a relationship with Amazon, you have a hitchhiker effect. You have a relationship with Google, you have a hitchhiker effect. You know, everywhere. This is not just how nature is, it's how human representational systems function. How could they not? They're in nature, even if they are artificial. So nothing very interesting about that. In terms of understanding why this kind of stuff occurs, Ross seems to think this is inexplicable. What's going on here? No, it's blatantly obvious what's going on there. So the next bookmark is, last night I was watching a recording of some parents helping, supporting their 6-year-old daughter in some of her first attempts at free climbing, both a vertical diagonal ledge and a vertical incline of about 30 feet, 45 feet. And they were protecting her and encouraging her and watching over the situation, advising her, supporting her. It was very beautiful, very heartwarming actually. But why have we not supposed that the Netheru, the gods, the angels, the non-human intelligences, have this kind of relationship with our people? There's all this talk of threat. They're violating our airspace. Your airspace doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the universe. It belongs to everyone. It's not a possession. You don't own airspace, except perhaps in the scope of military and or commercial concerns. Nothing is violating your airspace by, okay, so I guess the pigeons and the robins and the owls and the vultures, they're all just violating your airspace. We should shoot them down. They're a threat to navigation, right? There shouldn't be any natural phenomenon there should just be military control of assets. That's all. I mean, there's, cohorts among the humans who would fully get behind this and put their lives in jeopardy to support it. So when I was watching this video, it was very clear to me that non-human intelligences have a meta-parental relationship with our species. And it seems to be the fact that there's a phase in these relationships where you give the young, new beings freedom from your oversight and from your protection so that they can develop their own natural, intuitive, intelligent faculties as a species, right? And in this case, it's important that you not just show up and say like, yeah, we're here, we've been here the whole time, we're watching over you, be good. Because you have to give the independence, just as a human parent does with their children, each human parent uniquely and differently in different situations, in different families, and in different times of life. And naturally, among the humans, the elders care for the children. In healthy societies, conversely, the children and adults care for the elders later. Right? This goes in a circle. I'm not claiming that's important here, but it's extremely useful to understand that actually intelligent beings would not simply show up and show you their ID and say, this is what we are, this is who we are. That even gets to a much worse problem. They are aware of the problems with human knowledge that I've been speaking of for years. I know this because I was shown these problems by them. They are aware of them and very concerned about them. So the one thing they're not going to do, whoever they may be, and again, this is a complex range of phenomena. It's not one thing in the first place. And even if you were to single out one branch of the phenomena, it's still not one thing. In fact, ordinary phenomena are not one thing. Right? There's nothing you can get a single valued grasp on its identity unless either your concerns are incredibly simple or the object of concern is incredibly simple. And even then, the single valued grasp is the result of your concern and your perspective and your purpose, not the result of understanding what something, quote, is, unquote. Because to know what something is, you'd have to know why there are things and what is the purpose of existence, why there are beings. You'd have to have fundamental knowledge that human knowledge systems are entirely missing. So there's this perspective from which there are probably a number of metaparental intelligences associated with the Earth and the Sun, whether there are humans here or not. The Earth itself is such an intelligence, the Sun itself is such an intelligence, although I prefer the term transsentience. These are not things. Right? In fact, there really are no things. The closest thing to a thing is a tool or device produced by humans, and even that is not a thing. Because again, you can't get it outside the universe. You can't separate it from everything else. Although you can conceptually, for certain purposes, many of which are very important to me. I think we should think very distinctly about machines and devices than we do about nature, non-artificially produced situations. So I think we have a problem where the humans are at the phase of development where they either get their wings or, we go back to the Stone Age, or we're disappeared by ourselves. And we also form a threat, which should be obvious. I mean, we're the most lethal threat to the anciently conserved ecologies of Earth. So we are a disoriented species, which makes us much more dangerous and much more, makes it much more necessary to treat us with great caution. We don't respond well to novelty. One of the guys, I was listening to a couple of guys who do the Nightcrawler UAP tracking and analysis game. Hey! And they were talking about a night when an object approached them, and they were like, I ran like I was screaming for my mommy. So these guys are chasing the phenomenon, and when it actually shows up, they need diapers. No shade on them. Non-ordinary phenomena can be really shocking and pose a threat to one's ontology. So it's easy to understand why they might do that. However, just notice that in nearly all of the stories I've ever heard, where something shows up, humans get guns, right? And they don't ask questions. They're not there to figure out, are you friendly or not? They just put bullets in you. So there's that problem. Now this brings me to my third insight. The humans seem to think that the humans are a phenomenon that doesn't change, no matter what you do. And they do act that way a lot, so that's not entirely unjustified to think of humans this way. But they also frame the aliens as if they are a static thing that is static to itself and other beings. It's always the same thing. There's no chance of that being true. So the headline for this insight is historical and current relations change both participants dramatically. If you don't believe me, meet a human being and just watch what happens as you establish the relational context between you, what it includes and doesn't include, and whether or not there's misbehavior on either side. So as far as the humans go in relating with the phenomena, particularly at the species level, it's pure malignant, malevolent violence, right? It's shooting guns, it's trying to downcraft with microwave weapons, it's using psi operatives to deceptively call the phenomena into range of weapons, down it, and capture, right? It's this kind of shit. And this has been going on for a long fucking time. So it's very important to understand that, quote, the phenomena is transformed by the ways in which humans have historically related with it. And, that report card has F's all over it. F for fear. F for fuck off. F for kill you as quick as I can. F for steal your vehicle. Right? F for hide your bodies in vaults underground. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. F for build world-destroying weapons with whatever we can gather from you. And this is really important to understand. Relationships are established and negotiated over time. And, the report card for the humans with beings or situations from outside our knowledge is miserable, terrifying, bad. So we'd have to expect that anyone any branch of the phenomena would adjust for this. There are exceptions. It's not only this way, but at the species level, it's this way. So that means caution. And I want to address another feature that I was hearing Ross Coulthart talk about, which again is nonsensical. He claimed that we should treat the phenomenon with great caution because it's a trickster. This word has become overused and wildly misunderstood. Apparently, as far as Ross is concerned, phenomena themselves should always present with the same familiar face, easily captured by categorical, bookshelving, pigeonholing. And if it's not doing that, it's a trickster. Well, I'm pretty sure there are no phenomena that do that, except machines, right? So this is just nonsensical. If you watch animals that meet in the wilderness, and you watch enough encounters, what you find is play. They play together. They discover what it means to be beings together, right? I guess Ross would just call that a big trick. So there's nothing tricksterish about the phenomenon. That's an evaluation, and it's an unjustified one. If there's a trickster in this equation, it's human dissociation, disorientation, relational absence, absolute intent to exhaustively determine category and identity. There is no such thing as anything like that in the universe. This is purely a product of human cognitive damage, right, over millennia from Repcog. So yeah, the phenomenon is not a trickster. Are there phenomena that are tricksterish? Yeah, probably. But the UFO phenomena is not a trickstery phenomena. That's a gross misunderstanding of the nature of the process of establishing a relationship between beings that are not commonly in relation, right? So yeah, I don't see the phenomena as a trickster. As evidence for this ridiculous supposition, Ross told a story about a famous politician who was, in a highly populated public place, thousands of people, he said, and he saw an object in the sky, He saw a phenomenon in the sky. This is the other thing. Reid insists these are objects. Good luck. Stuff that's in a superposition doesn't have an ordinary category, right? It's all the categories at once. This is the other thing that humans are not paying attention to. There are superpositions over identity. These are natural to all phenomena, right? This is why you can't know what a tree is. Good luck, because it's everything, localized as something. The form is static. The nature is not static. This is, another one of the things that I find amazing is just to think carefully about what it would mean to be that your being, your nature, is above the categories of thing, being, process, object, machine, organism, so forth, right? Anything above those categories is a transforming field of potential identities that will collapse according to how it's interacted with, not according to what it is or isn't. because it isn't a specific phenomena, right? Anyway, Ross tells this story about this politician who saw this phenomena and pointed it out to his companion who couldn't see it. And Ross uses this as evidence that the phenomena is a trickster. No, it's not a trickster. Let me ask you a question about this. When you establish a relationship, do you establish it with everybody? Just go like, broad scale? You just walk into a public place and suddenly you're in relation with 1,000 people that are there? 100 people? 10 people? No. It can happen. We do this in certain rituals and places, sports events and concerts and, courtrooms and so forth. But those are highly specialized contexts. So when you approach beings, you are selective, right? Usually they send, if they're intelligent, they may send an emissary, and you send an emissary, and these two meet and they negotiate context and identity and purpose and so forth, right? So there's nothing surprising about the fact that the situations that occur are situational intimacies that involve certain people and not others. There are ordinary phenomena that are like this, where one person senses them. So I'll give an example. Like if I'm walking with my friend Kevin, his eyesight is not so great, and back in the day when we used to go for walks, which is a long time ago now, my eyesight was still exceptional. So, I would notice, this still happens to me today with other people, I would notice a tiny insect or something on the ground, and I would be very aware of it, and I would say, hey, do you see that? Nope. And, I can hear the objection, yeah, but everybody can see the moon. Really? You sure? They seeing the same thing? They might be having a visual experience of the moon, but that's not the same thing for each of the persons that is having it, particularly if some of those persons are in touch with the moon, right? Have intimacy with the moon. In their awareness, in their intelligence, in their hearts. So all of these matters need to be taken into account. I know that's a weird way to put it. We have to acknowledge them openly, consciously, in the beginning, not someday when we manage to escape the bizarre traps of our bias and insistence that things be normal. Okay, what is my next bookmark here? Okay. I put the notes in, but they didn't transfer. I think I'll take a break, meditate, and I will return. Hopefully with some new insight. My mind is much more quiet now. We moderns ignore absolutely primordial features of nature, the situation of our world, not in terms of human concerns, in terms of origin and what it's up to. To the representational mind, It's basically just a machine puzzle. Yeah? Oh, this happens because that happens, right? Sunlight equals photosynthesis or whatever. None of these things are accidental. None of them are merely mechanical. This world and all beings are enmeshed in a manifold of womb-like and thus semi- or meta-parental relationships. And anyone who's trying to achieve something that resembles actual understanding, which is quite different from explanation, a word that literally means to flatten and diagram. You want to start from a position where primordial matters are at least clear in your concern. Locally here in our travel through interstellar space following the sun is absolutely primordial to everything here. It generates it moment to moment, not just historically the way that humans usually think. And so too the Earth and the Moon, and so too the intelligences or transcentiences, right? The networks of intelligence that indwell in time-space and in those features of what I call the dandelion from which time-space arises. Again, both historically, futurially, and moment to moment. And so it should be very clear, you know, we have sort of tropes, right? We call Earth Mother Earth sometimes. Some of us do. And this makes it apparent that it's like a woman who generates a womb on, right? Who generates her children on her surface rather than interiorly. And there's all kinds of these inversions in nature. One thing's internal, over here it's external, it's yin here, it's yang there. And so having forgotten or ignored all of this, the humans are running around looking for explanations. Well, they should try to understand simple matters before attempting to understand extremely unusual to their preferred ways of blind thinking. I was watching last night. Someone close to me wanted me to watch a video, and it was of a figure skater, the world champion, perhaps her name was Kim, performing. And at first, right, I was kind of captured by my left hemisphere-like concerns. It's like, okay, I've seen figure skating before. I know what this is. I can pigeonhole this. And I thought the music was terrible, being a musician. You know, I have strong affinities and disaffinities. And so in the beginning, I was kind of trying to find my way into the experience of observing this. And I wasn't having much luck. And my companion was trying to explain that they had been essentially completely overwhelmed emotionally by watching this. So it was important to my companion, who's important to me. By the way, notice that word important, right? I will bring this in. I will import it. So I watched for a little while, mostly disinterested in trying to find a way in. And then suddenly it hit me what it was that my companion was seeing, which was not what I was paying attention to. And as I watched the young woman performing her grace and elegance, a variety of crucial things suddenly broke through like insight into my awareness. And I realized that I was observing an expression of the absolute ecstasy and liberation that is possible for an incarnate being, right? Because they belong to two worlds, the world of the impossible, which is most of what exists, and the world of the actual, which is, the imprimatur of the physical layer of our nature and experience. And in her performance, I was seeing these two essentially just making love to each other in the body and spirit and grace and skillfulness of the young woman, and I was absolutely overwhelmed. I could barely contain myself. And when I was trying to explain to my companion later, I was just losing my shit. I was crying and I couldn't say what it was. I was trying to say the words that I've said here, and I just couldn't get them out without bawling. And the humans seem to think that the physical world is predictable and concrete and rational and continuous and knowable and by representational cognition and so forth. This is all nonsense. What's actually going on here is that organisms are importing the impossible into the physical layer. It's very interesting that Jeffrey Kripal at Rice University oversees is the librarian, sort of actually, I'm not sure precisely what his position is in language, but they have at Rice this library of documents and artifacts that are called the Archives of the Impossible. The impossible is everything that is. The knowable is like the fingernail on the pinky of your hand, right? It's hard, it's always there unless something pulls it off, or you die or something, right? It's reliable, dependable, you think you know what it is, you don't know what it is because nobody knows what cells are. So we have all these kind of circular definitions for things that depend on other definitions that we, and if you go down to the root, it's impossible, it's just mysterious. How is it that I can even walk? Right? I don't have to think about it, though changing my awareness of how I walk radically affects my experience and the skillfulness with which I can enact my body's potentials, right? As a student of Tai Chi for many years, I'm not claiming to be skillful, committed, yes, accomplished, no. But Tai Chi, when you see it done by someone who actually understands the principles, right, and has moved far beyond the choreography, it is impossible. The reason that we love exhibitions of human skillfulness and creativity, intelligence and insight is that they are impossible to our ordinary expectations. We're looking for violations of our ontology in some dimensions of our human experience, and then we're absolutely committed to preserving ontologies that blind us when it comes to the nature of time-space, intelligence in the cosmos, and so forth. I also think it's hilarious that the humans think that the machines in the sky, the objects in the sky, are machines. Because they certainly belong to a class that's more blur than it is a thing. And this is clear when you hear people like Bob Lazar, for example, talk about a phenomenon that looked like an object. The thing has no moving parts. Is that a machine? What even is that? Many of the things that have been recovered appear to have been constituted in such a way as if you could just sort of vibrate the medium of space-time and thus produce an integrated physical phenomena that certainly is not merely a machine. Other people, Jake Barber particularly, have claimed that the objects, quote unquote, that some of them seem to be beings when encountered. It's super important to understand that ordinary phenomena share this. Who and what I may become change dramatically depending on who I'm with and what we're doing, right? And so why would we expect that there's some, fundamental classification that will solve our problems around this, terrifying mystery? I mean, the real terrifying mystery around here isn't UFOs. It's why is our species omnicidally stupid and absolutely committed to obliterating the foundations of life on this planet? What the fuck happened to this animal? Right? And this is a primary concern for every human child ever born, for every human mother, for everyone who loves anyone or anything. We're told, well, that's just the way it is. Is that true? That's not just the way it is. Something's organizing and orchestrating these problems. And the humans seem to think like we're the important thing going on around here. That is, it's not untrue from our perspective, but it's wildly untrue. This is the home of beings who incarnate as beings. The bees, the trees, the living places, the rainforests, the ice caps, all of these things. Yeah. These are incarnating sparks of being, of origin. And their home matters to all beings in all of time, not just those of us here on Earth. There's a layer in which they are instantaneously connected with each other and all other beings and all other worlds and stars. This whole separation has precedence thing is absolute nonsense. It seems to work well, again, in a limited scope of concern. If you want understanding, you're going to go for unity, not distinction. There's another feature of the situation with the ice skater that I rarely talk about, but is important to me. So I remember being shown it long ago when a toy maker was with my mind. I asked him questions about shoes. Right? Why do the women on our world, what is this thing with high heels and standing on their tiptoes and ballerinas and things like this? Yeah? It's spinning around. And if you think about it, it becomes very obvious, very important and dangerously obvious, that the Earth spins on her poles, which are ice caps, right? So when I was watching the young woman, and the judges, of course, were analyzing her rotations, right? How many rotations can she pull off in the air? or on the ice and so forth, and with what degree of skill. Now, this is fundamentally the women embodying and expressing the nature of the Earth's experience in time-space. She spins on tiptoe on ice caps. And the other feature that was shown to me is when those ice caps melt, big problems ensue for life on Earth. And it isn't from the water. Earth is a being that is not unlike a woman in that she attracts suitors of different kinds. And when the ice caps melt, she will attract suitors. In a way, these are like shields. It's sort of like her being barefoot. And this story is exemplified in the Cinderella myth, where she loses her crystal slipper. These are not accidents. That story was not written by humans. I know who Cinderella is. It's the Earth. She has 3 stepsisters: Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. She used to be covered in ash. We literally call her dirt. Her soil is fertile, right? The soil of the other worlds is not intrinsically fertile. This world, orbiting this star, is the organism world. These things matter fundamentally, primordially. It's vastly more important that life on Earth, and particularly complex life, continue than it is that humans continue. Although there's complexities to that story that I'm not going to get into today. So when I get to see my notes again sometime when I get home, since they didn't transmit to my phone, I may continue this recording, but for now, these are my thoughts and perspectives. I hope you found them enlightening. I hope you will take some of my my somewhat strong advice to heart in terms of how to cognize matters related to the issues I've been highlighting here, and that you may find some insight of your own, or that your dreaming mind may also awaken to these matters, because these are things that are deeply intrinsic to the dreaming aspects of our awareness, but are often alien, quote unquote, to our waking awareness. There are no aliens. This universe is one being in many forms. That has primordial precedence beyond all possibilities of representational cognition. Intimacy and relationship are the foundations of being and existing and development. So, thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful for this time together. I hope you'll take a moment and tickle the algorithm in whatever way feels right, or support my work if that feels good to you. I wish you a beautiful way, amazing dreams, healing, love, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. Bye-bye for now.